Hey friends, here we are then, day 5, the final installment of this 5-day pencil sketching challenge. So if you've just stumbled upon this, please do start with day 1 and progress through up until this day 5. I'm going to link to all the different days in the description below so you can find them really easily. In this final day, this final sketch together, I'm going to be showing you how to draw the portrait of a hen. If you can call it a portrait. Can you call it a portrait if it's a hen? The head of a hen, at least anyway. So you'll find the reference photograph in the description below, along with a link to my free guide. If you enjoy sketching, there's a free guide in there called 101 Sketchbook Ideas. Going to save you lots of time looking for reference photographs, reference material for your day-to-day sketching. And it's also going to give you some more challenges like this one that you can follow along at your own pace. So check that out in the description as well. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I do hope you've had a chance to follow along. That's what these lessons are designed for after all. I want you to improve. I want you to see a measurable difference by the time you're finished. And you can only do that if you've got a pencil in your hand. Okay, go do your hen sketch then, and then I shall see you, all being well, in a future video here on the channel. Now there's a number of different ways that we can take this sketch. We don't have to be anywhere near as pedantic and as observant as we do when we're drawing, say, a human portrait or even a full-bodied animal study where even a small discrepancy in the proportions is really going to stand out. It's not going to matter to that degree just for the head study. But we still want to make a reasonable effort to try and get the pose and the head position right so that it's got that authenticity about it. And there's a number of things that you can do to help with that process. So the first thing I'm going to look at is an angle between the tip of the beak and the eye. So I always like to look at angles. If ever I'm thinking about where to start, it's always a good go-to. Just creating that angle straight away then helps tell you a lot about the tilt of the head, the turn of the head. So just an angle between where the beak is and the eye. And then from here, I can start to break these into straight lines to create this structure here. So we've got this first one here. I'm just going to look at it as a simple triangular shape. And then for the crown, I want to look at this angle here. So it's actually sloping this way. And then I'm not looking at these individual triangular shapes. I just want to look at I could either do it as a curve or I could do it as a series of straight lines. Don't worry about getting them correct at this early stage. So we're going to refine these later on or in a moment. So this line here, look, it's still got an upward slope to it. So it's tempting to kind of draw this line down here because it's a different angle to this one, but it's still got an upward slope to it. And then it kind of straightens out here. And then I can put this shape in here as, be sure it's got an anatomical name. I have no idea what that is. I'm going to put that in just as a basic oval. And all I'm thinking about when I place that oval in, what is the size of that basic shape relative to that one? What is the size of this relative to that one? And it's just a feel thing, but it's actually surprisingly easy to do when you keep to these simple shapes and you take all the worries and concerns about individual contours out of the equation. So I can put that other one in there and I'm just looking at this little bit of space that's left. So look at that little bit of space there. Maybe we can put the start of the body in. I don't know how much of this that we want to do, but I can put that bit in there and I can then compare that little shape to that one. And mine doesn't look right. So that's going to need some adjusting. So we'll come back and adjust that in a moment. So let's carry on to this area here. So look at that nice little bit of negative space there. That as a shape. Let's do this bit here as an oval. And again, what is the size of this to this? So this here, so this one feels a little bit smaller than what I've got it there. I've got this shape I can put in. So where's the position? So look at the outer edge. If I was to run the pencil down there, it creates an angle. So I'm not placing this back here. I'm thinking about where this is and where the edge is in relation to the edge of this one. So it creates a bit of an angle between the two. And then look, there's a nice angled edge you can put in there just above the eye. That then makes it relatively straightforward to place the eye in. So I can look at it relative to this here. And can you see how there's about the distance between the eye and this shape is about roughly about another eye's size. It's certainly accurate enough for this kind of a study. And then let's double check, how does this now compare to this one? So that's roughly in the same place, maybe needs to be a little bit further this way. So we've got this straight edge, so let's carry this on up and look at this shape here. So these feathers that come out. So it's telling me that this is incorrect, all of this is incorrect, but it doesn't matter. The purpose of putting this down is to make a start. And when you keep to these really simple, basic shapes and you keep them really loose, you're more than happy to erase them and adjust them. So I can look at how around about the bottom, this is where it curves into here. So around about the bottom of this. So that shape there. Okay, now I can see that this needs to be quite a bit higher. Looking at that angle there, maybe a bit of a steeper angle, and then the next angle. By all means, lay your pencil down. It's actually quite hard to see those and judge those angles, so by all means, place your pencil down. So this spike, look how it's directly above the eye. So there's my point there, and now it goes from this angle to this angle, and the point is directly above the eye. So now we can put this angle in. Okay, this we could say you could take an angle here. So the next break in the angle, that one to that one, that one to that one, occurs over the eye on that angle. Or you could just take a point down like we did with the eye there. So you could take a point down and say it's just outside this. So somewhere about there. And it comes down on, let's just check that one. Maybe not quite as steep, but again, it doesn't matter too much. So it comes down there, and then got this little piece that comes in. So the beak is going to be a bit higher up. So what we've got at this stage, yes, it looks a mess, agreed, but it's a really good solid start. The proportions, the overall proportions and shape are there. We need to fine tune them slightly. We can do that through the next stage as we start looking at more individual contours. But it's something that you can get down really, really quickly, 5 minutes, no more than that. And it really helps to give you the confidence to then go on and create more detailed work that you can then shade. So you could leave this as it is and then just go over with stronger pencil lines. If you're going to do a really quick sketch, that's not a problem. I like to erase them back a little bit because I don't like to have any strong edges, and because I tend to use the pencil a little bit firmer on camera than what I would do ordinarily, so it shows up a bit more. So as you've seen me do in the other lessons, I'm just going to erase all of this back. So I'm still going to be able to see it. And even if I can't see it, the fact that I've laid it in somehow plants it into your brain, makes it that much easier to then recall as you do your more refined layer. So let's just put a little bit more detail now into the contours. So I'm going to start with the beak, and it felt a little bit long the way I'd got that beak originally, so I'm going to just shorten that ever so slightly. So we have this nice negative shape down here, really good one to get in. I can just spend a little bit more time just making sure these shapes are correct. So we've got this circular, semicircular shape in here. I want to still do the checks and make sure I'm happy with angles, that sort of thing. So I can put a little indication of the nostril in. We've got a bit of a line there for the beak. I'm only going to put this in quite lightly because it's going to be something I'll look at more at the detail, the shading stage of things. So we've got a little notch there just above the beak. And then for the eye, I think mine was probably just a little bit too high up. So I just missed the angle there between the two. And it won't really matter, you know, for a study like this, but we might as well observe it correctly if you spot these things. So what you can notice as well is this part of the eye is quite circular, but you see how there's an angle running across there and here, and that gives it this quite stern, almost angry look to it. And I think that's quite indicative of this animal. Has that fierce look to it. Not that you would really call a hen fierce, but I'm sure you know what I mean in terms of the expression that that eye creates. And then just have a look at the placement of the pupil as well. So you just look at the distance around here and how there isn't that same distance at the top. That's quite important because it tells you where the eye is sitting in the socket, whether, you know, it helps to create the correct expression. So all I'm doing here is just marking out where this shadow is, this shadow ring around the outside. It's going to be quite important to get that in when we shade. So let's move back and then carry on here. So look at this little notch here. You see how this notch is just above the eye? You see how mine is below? So it's just something that I've noticed that, again, really isn't going to matter too much. Probably means I needed to just extend the beak slightly. So let's just take this a little bit further back. And then this notch is going to come out here. And then we can move into these triangular shapes of the crown. Okay, now I think when you've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 of these points, that it's worth your time, even with a quicker sketch, to count them and to try and get the same number in. And you can put this middle one in first, so we could put this top one in here. Just think about where the height is, so this is the top point, isn't it? So you could put where that top one is, and it's directly above the eye, and that way you're not going to do 1 and then 2 and then find that the third one is too far over, you haven't got enough room to put them all in. That's the quickest way to do it without, you know, especially when you've got more than 4 or 5 of these things. There we go. And zoom out a bit so you can see where I'm up to. So just looking at this piece here. So we've got a nice straight edge along there, and that goes into another angle here, and it creates this, got this dark shape above the eye. So if I can get that straight edge in there, I then know that this is all going to be in shadow. So this is this dark piece of shadow here. And then we've got this piece coming out. Again, I have no idea what the names of these things are. Okay, and then let's go back to this little bit of negative space. So just to back up a little bit there, so I wasn't too confident in drawing this line in here, around here, and getting it the right shape. So all I did was I just shifted across to a place that I do feel a bit more confident about. And that is this nice negative shape here. So I know that if I can get this side in, it just helps me then. I can compare this space here, where the height of this comes in relation to this one here. So you can see, how does that look compared to that? And then with this side in, now I feel like I can get this angle in, and I can put this whole shape in with a bit more confidence. So if you do come across a point in a drawing that you're not too sure about, that you're struggling with, don't just try and kind of wing your way around that. Go and find another part of the drawing that you do feel more confident with, and it's like doing a jigsaw. You put pieces in that you know that will fit together. The more pieces that you put in, those difficult pieces suddenly reveal themselves. Okay, so we've got this shape here, this sort of almost like an elongated diamond shape just above the hen's eye, and that's quite important for the expression again. This sort of fierce, angry expression that this hen has got. Got a line up there, so I don't want to put too many more details in than this. We're going to leave these mainly for the shading stage. We'll come on to that in a moment. Okay, so I've just put in a few indications of the feathers there. I don't think I'm going to shade those. I'm going to keep it just to this head study, and this is just to give it some context, so it's not just a floating head on the page there. That's all I'm going to do for the sketch. I'm going to bring in my 8 or 7B pencil, 7, 8B, something like that, nice and soft. That's going to stop us from getting too fiddly with the detail, and we're going to be able to lay in fairly large areas, hopefully quite quickly with that pencil. Okay, so let's move on to the shading. Okay, so to stay consistent with the other lessons, I'm going to make this black and white. So the noir or the mono seem to be the best. I'm going to go with the mono. The noir is a little bit too black. You could adjust if you wanted to adjust the settings of the shadows and the highlights, but I'm going to leave it at that. I think that'll work okay. We can do something with that. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to go for is the darkest shadow tones that I can see. And that's just going to help me then compare and contrast all the other tones, because I've got the two extreme ends of the value scale. I've got the white of the paper and I've got my darkest tones, which are essentially black. So we can put these in around here, this one in for the eye, maybe put some in around here as well. So I'm going to try and lay these in quite quickly. And the 7B hopefully is going to let us do that. Just in and around this eye area, so we can get all of this in really, really quickly. So I'm moving the pencil backwards and forwards. So I'm not using full pressure for this, because I just want to feather it out, as, no pun intended, as I get towards the lighter edge, and I can use a little bit of cross-hatching or just marks in the opposite direction more than cross-hatching, just to strengthen the value of that. And it's something we can go in right at the very end and really bring up the darkest areas. But for now, I just want to get it blocked in relatively quickly. And then let's get some around here. So we've got this nice negative space that I was relying on before. And working quite quickly with your pencil, even if it means that you not so much make a mistake, but maybe go over some areas that you didn't intend to. Working quickly with your pencil right from the start sets a precedent for how you're going to approach the rest of the sketch. And it's amazing how, if you start off quite neat, and you start off maybe in the eye area and you get quite neat, you almost continue that on right throughout the drawing. And then you've got no chance in doing it, you know, and keeping it quick and keeping it loose with a little bit of energy to it. So pick an area that is less detailed that you can block in quickly and start with that and get yourself into this mindset of quick and loose, fast strokes. Here we go. I don't want to go too far down in that area because I don't know how much of that we're going to do. So just backing up here, maybe do some of these darker tones but that aren't quite as dark. I'm just going to strengthen this around here. Just really, it really is the darkest part of the drawing. As dark as anything else on the drawing at least. So now looking around the eye area, can zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit clearly what I'm looking at. So the eye itself, or the iris, or the pupil even, and put that in quite strong. What I don't want to do is an entire circle, because look how there's a nice highlight that just cuts into it at the top. So we definitely want to retain that. The downside you've got with these softer pencils, of course, is that they blunt quite quickly. So do have a sharpener to hand, and particularly when you're doing a more intricate area like this eye, don't do what I'm doing. Take your time and sharpen your pencil a little bit. It's probably the eye more than anything else that you need a sharp pencil for, or reasonably sharp at least. So as I put this shadow in, just a thing to notice is I'm not trying to do this neat circle, because that's not how it is it? So this shadow here, it's thicker in parts, it's quite a shaky line all over. It's not neat in any way, shape or form. So that's a good thing when you're working with a blunt pencil, but just don't worry about trying to get it too neat. In fact, purposely avoid that. So we've got this shadow around here, so I'm just looking at, again, the darkest values. This isn't quite as dark as some of the other values that I've already put in, but it's a darker one. Now that thin highlight there, this is a thin highlight, isn't it? So look how thick mine is. So I've probably gone a little bit wrong there, but we can make an adjustment. And it's not going to matter at the end of the day. Okay, and then we've got this little piece here, so I can just see a bit of a dark line here. So all the time I'm looking at these abstract shapes. I'm not thinking about being a chicken. I'm just, or what a chicken would look like. I'm just thinking about or looking for abstract shapes. Okay, so let's just get your bearings. There's lots of detail in this, but it is quite quick to render. So very different to those feathers. I think would take quite a long time and would definitely be quite tedious. So look here, this value is definitely, it's getting softer. So it's darker here, but it's getting softer into the light. There is a definite edge there. So I'm looking at that definite edge, but less pressure there and then more pressure in towards the eye. So it just gives it a bit of a sense of curvature. And then coming round into this piece here. So still always trying to hold the pencil relatively far back. You've got to hold it a little bit closer to the edge than you would do for the outline sketch just while you're doing these dark values, just in order for you to be able to place the necessary pressure on the pencil. But I'm not like this. I don't want to be like this. This is too neat, too controlled. Okay, now if you defocus your eyes, yes, we've got these highlights in here, but can you see how this area here is essentially, all of this is all in shadow. So if I can think about leaving this point, that's fine. But to speed things up, what I could do is block it all in, then use an eraser just to pick that out. So let's have a go at that. The pencil that I'm using it's a high carbon content pencil. And what that means is that it's not as easy to erase, but nevertheless, I'm still going to block this whole area in, and then we'll worry about the erasing later. Okay, this shape here, so we've got this, what I was thinking, looked like a seashell. So got a few of these lines and striations there, a few that cut into the shape. So just looking at these triangular shapes, I'm not trying to get everyone exact. I'm just looking at them, getting a sense of that as an abstract shape, and then putting in something that's a representation of that. Okay, let's just zoom out a little bit, maybe do a little bit of work on the beak. So we've got a nice strong dark value there for the nostril, and then not quite as strong, we've got the line for the mouth. So actually got a couple of lines there. So just moving your head backwards and forwards just so you can keep a track with where it is that you're actually drawing from. So you've got this nice bit of dark shadow in here. And then look at this really dark shadow here. So just draw that in very roughly. There's a shadow I can see that comes across here, but then a deeper shadow in here. A little nice highlight edge there, so let's retain that one. And then block this in, so taking it across there. And then this, if you have a look at the rest of this shape, you've got this lightest area through the middle there, and then it darkens off around the edge to the point where it almost gets lost into the shadowy background behind it. So let's see if we can just represent that. Nice highlight edge up there. So I definitely want to try and retain that one. There's a little bit of texture on that, so we could maybe look at putting some of that in towards the end. But at this stage, I just want to get the shapes blocked in. So get the overall structure and shape blocked in, and we can look at little textures right towards the end. Okay, so let's get a bit of shadow in on the beak here, this area. So just above this line, so this line that we put in for the mouth, I'm just going to soften it ever so slightly just to show that it's got a little bit of curvature to it. And then on the front of the beak, we've got some tone there. A little bit of tone around the beak itself, a little bit coming off the mouth there. We've got this nice dark bit of shadow shape. I'll point of the pencil, a little bit of shadow here. So just basically working your way around the drawing, looking at all these different abstract shapes. Nice little bit of dark tone there just to describe how this is folding around the top of the beak. Okay, now the crown, it's quite a big area this, so let's see how we can block this in a little bit more quickly. So all I'm doing here is just identifying which bit is in shadow. I'm looking for the strongest shadow tones. There's a little bit of a extra shadowy area there. And then what I'm going to use is side of the pencil. Hopefully this will allow some of the paper surface to show through and represent some of that nice texture that's within that crown. So because I don't want it too uniform, and because there's quite a lot of texture within that, I'm trying not to use the pencil all this way because that would look quite neat, quite a neat texture. So by just moving the pencil in different directions, it just helps to create different areas of different patterns that then help to further indicate that this is a rough and random texture. So a little bit less pressure around here, you can see it's a bit lighter. Let's zoom in and pull that down, there we go. So I'm just trying to leave any areas so that there's a little bit of highlight, and then this area of highlight you can help describe by just putting a little bit more tone just around the bottom edge of this one, and then what that helps is this to stand out a little bit more. Okay, I can do the same for this area as well, just give it a little bit of texture using the side of the pencil, but obviously a lot lighter pressure. So Don't, again, be too bogged down with lots of different detail, lots of different textures. We can fill those in at the end. The most important thing is to get the overall form blocked in first. If we can cover most of the paper surface with the overall value, the overall tone that you think that area is, it's so much easier then to go back in at the final stages and just lift everything up with a little indication of texture. Okay, it needs a little bit of weight around here, so let's just get some of the textures in, some of the values in around here. So we've got some darker shadows. Overall, this is a darker, see how that's a darker tone than this one. So let's just get that blocked in quickly. Again, side of the pencil. There's a little bit of a line there, broken line, hit and miss. Okay, and then let's look at the back here, back of the feathers that are coming off here. So value for this, just blocking in with the side, is darker here, and then it's lighter there. It's not the white of the paper, but it's a lot lighter. And then as it comes in around here, there's some dark feathers underneath there. Okay, around this area here, I'm just noticing some slightly different texture pattern here. So it's like dots. So I'm just going to place a few of these dots in. Probably some patterning around the feathers. Okay, so what I've got at this stage is most of the paper area within the sketch that I'm doing. Most of the paper surface is covered. So it's a good start, but we now need to start adding more refinements, adjusting the values, adding little bits of texture. So let me take you through parts of those. We'll just address each part as we come to it, how we can refine those. This process, this part of the drawing is the bit that I really enjoy. I think this is the exciting bit. You've laid the groundwork. It's now about refining things, just going through each part of the sketch and putting in as much work as you want to at this stage. It's probably taken no more than 15 minutes if I was just doing this without commentary, maybe 5 minutes to do the outline sketch, another 5-10 minutes, say, to block in all of this, maybe 15 at most, 20 minutes to get to this stage. We can now spend another 10, 15, 20, as much time as you want to, creating these extra bits of detail and texture. So I'm going to start around the eye, and I'm just going to tell you what it is that I'm looking for as I add these extra bit of detail. So we've got this kind of shadow ring around here, but at the moment it's blocked in as a single value. And if you look closely, what you'll find is that there's darker parts to that, so it's darker around the bottom. So I can just gently strengthen this part around here, and then you can see how the shadow then, there's a bit of a cast shadow created by that comes off it. So just very, very minor refinement. And in and of itself, it won't make any difference to your drawing, but it's all of these little refinements that add up to make all the difference. So this is not the white of the paper, so I need to knock that tone back. A little highlight in there that I just managed to retain, just this little one here. So this is quite a light shape. Okay, but let's go back to the eye. So let's look how the iris is, again, not the white of the paper, and it's actually a darker value, a darker tone towards the bottom. It's got this curvature to it. So I can use a little bit more pressure, we'll go over the paper just a little bit more around the bottom there. If you need to, point of the pencil, so pointing the pencil down, and that you can then just re-establish the real dark outer ring. I want to maintain that nice highlight. I think that really helps to draw the attention to what is essentially the focal point now, the eye. And then look how this area here is all quite dark, isn't it? So I can lose the white of that paper there. I want to create a bit more shadow, a bit of a thicker shadow on that edge. Lose a bit of the highlight there. So it's not this complete ring, complete circle of highlight, is it? You've got highlight here, and then it's lost a bit, and then a bit more. So these are the small details, kind of details that we're looking for. Okay, and then just looking at this shape in here. So very little of the white of the paper showing there, so I can just refine that shape. And again, within this shadow shape here, there's going to be darker areas and lighter areas. There's some texture coming off, so I can start looking at individual lines. So I'm looking at these lines here and little cracks in the skin that give it this really distinctive skin texture that a hen has got. So you're not going to get them all in, and you don't need to. Just if you can observe a couple of them and put those in, and then you can essentially make some up yourself. So all of these white shapes, I'm just noticing how they're not a smooth outer edge. You know, there's little lines and cracks and fissures that penetrate into them. There's no smooth lines on this study at all. So even this that you might think is a smooth line, I'm just breaking that line up. Add a little bit of tone down the bottom there. Okay, so just refining this shape now. So again, look how there's darker areas of shadow within this. So we've blocked in what is essentially the shadow shape. You can soften off, maybe add a few little bits and pieces here and there, but within this now I can create darker areas. Okay, a little bit more work on this one as well. Just in exactly the same way. So just picking out some darker areas, adding some little cracks and lines. There's little bits of detail here and there. Look how this is all in shadow. Okay, so I'm coming into this area, and again, just want to break up this shadow line so I can give an indication of texture. So I mentioned before about how we could create some texture. I'm just dancing the pencil, touching it so I can, what I'm trying to do is create this representation of these little dots, little lumps and bumps that are within the surface texture of the skin. Okay, and then up into the beak. So again, have a look at your highlight areas that you're left with. Hopefully you've got plenty to work with and you can reduce them, because that's a lot easier to do, obviously, than having to erase highlight areas back, particularly if you're using a pencil like I am with this high carbon content. It's quite difficult to erase. You probably need something a little bit more stubborn than a kneaded eraser, and maybe you'll need to cut a little slice off with a razor blade just to help to create something that you can shape your drawing with a little bit easier than the thick vinyl erasers. And one of the things about observing your subject matter quite carefully, even when you don't necessarily have to be too careful, so like a subject like this, when you observe it quite carefully, all of these little shapes hopefully will marry up with what you're looking at the reference. If you're quite quick and carefree with your sketch, which is fine, you know, if that's what you're going for a really quick, carefree sketch, you're not worried about observing it too carefully. The challenge with that then is that a lot of these shapes don't marry up, so when you come to the shading side of things, it becomes a little bit trickier because you have to look at textures, make your mind up how that texture is, how it behaves, how the light plays with it, and then create it yourself in the areas that are left on your drawing, because those areas aren't going to marry up. So any little areas on your drawing that you want as highlights, you can, I'm going to try and just lift a little bit out with the eraser, just to brighten them up a little bit, but to help strengthen them, if you strengthen the values immediately around them, certainly underneath them anyway, the shadow, that will help them stand out as brighter. Okay, now in the crown area, so the same kind of approach. Okay, so what I'm doing in this area for the crown is I'm just pushing the pencil in, dancing it round, so lifting off, pushing in, lifting off, pushing in, and what I'm trying to create is this pitted, this sense of a pitted texture. So little darker areas, little areas that of light that are drawn in negatively with the darks around them. But what I want to do, I don't want to use too much pressure because I don't want to adjust the values. It's obviously going to make things a bit darker, but I don't want to adjust them too much. And I don't want to create one flat value. I want to make sure that I retain the underlying values that I created when I blocked it in initially. Okay, so just taking a stand back from your work, defocus your eyes. Are there any areas that you feel the values need to be a little bit darker or stronger? For example, I felt like this needs to be a little bit stronger around here, maybe a little bit of extra tone just around this part. But stand back, defocus your eyes, look mainly at the overall values rather than the detail, because they're the things that are going to make the difference. That's what people are going to notice first and foremost. It's not the intricate details, it's the overall form and structure. Okay, so I can maybe just put a bit of an indication of these feathers in here, but I don't want to put too much. I think we're coming to the end of this sketch now. So I'm just going to add a few of these feathers in, just really simply, not in anywhere near as much detail or as much effort in as that, just a bit of an impression. Put a little bit of darks down here just to draw that feather in negatively. So I'm going to call that one finished. I think it's, as much as I want to take it, I don't want to do any more around this area here. That's going to start getting too tricky, knowing where to finish. I think this is really helpful, just a little indication of feathers, and in this area here it helps to draw the eye up into the focal point. Leaving this blank and leaving this fairly empty as well just helps to create this composition so that the eye is led into, the viewer's eye is led into the focal point, which is obviously the eye and the beak, this area around here. So another really enjoyable sketch, another nice subject matter for you to have a go at, one that you can really get stuck into the shading side of things and not worry too much about the observational process, particularly in that drawing out stage. This has probably taken me about 40 minutes, 45 minutes in total. You could spend a little bit longer, maybe bring in some H pencils, a HB or a B, and get a little bit more refinement, maybe some smoother tones on the beak there, maybe a little bit more of the texture in to the crown and within and around the eye. It's entirely up to you, but you can certainly do this sketch within 40 minutes, maybe even half an hour if you don't put quite as much detail in as I have, but it is one that is definitely worth a go, really enjoyable.